Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of EverydayFI, the show that explores the lives and stories of people in the financial independence community. Today on the show, I'll be speaking with an anonymous guest who will be known as Jay, and the big topic of our conversation is divorce. We dive deep into Jay's money story and the parallels in how he rescued his mom financially and then also his wife later on. We also talk about how a mismatched life vision between partners can upend even the most loving relationships. You'll also find out what money conversations Jay thinks people should have when they first start dating to avoid heartache in the future. We both agree that talking about hard things with your partner is the only way to foster a thriving relationship. Otherwise, it's unfair to you and them to kick difficult topics under the rug. There's a reason people say one of the best money decisions you can make is marrying the right person, so it's safe to say the opposite is also true. Also, a quick note on this episode, I mentioned that I went to FinCon in October. This episode is coming out late October. I actually ended up not going because financially it didn't make sense for me. Just wanted to make that note. We're going to take a quick break to hear a word from our sponsors, but when we come back, we'll hear Jay's story. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining me today. I am actually talking to an anonymous guest. We're going to call him Jay. He picked a pseudonym. And I just want to emphasize for my audience that if you are nervous about coming on this show, but you really want to share your story, you can totally be anonymous and pick a pseudonym. Whatever you want. You can be Queen Elizabeth or Pocahontas. I don't care. We will go ahead with your episode and we can do some vagaries around your details, but we can get to the meat of your story. I still would love to hear from anybody, even if you want to be anonymous. So I just want to put that out there for everybody. But hey, Jay, how are you doing today?
I am doing wonderful. Thank you so much for having me, Megan.
Yeah, I'm so glad you're here. And I'm really excited to dive into your story. So today we are talking about something that is a little bit more specific than the usual for this podcast. But before we do that, Jay, why don't you give us some details, whatever you'd like to share? I know you want to be anonymous, so they can be as vague as you want about yourself, your job, career, family details, where you live, things like that.
Yeah, so I am currently reside in, we'll just say, the Southeast United States. I am recently separated. I have three children, middle school age. I'm a self-employed professional, and I have been a self-employed professional for about the past 20 years, which is hard to say. I can't believe it's been that long. And so that's me personally. And as you alluded to earlier, the topic I want to talk about is the fact that I am recently separated. And when that happened, and even before that happened, I did a lot of searching and Googling and looking up old podcasts and looking for resources, specifically podcasts where people had talked about the topic of divorce and separation and how it affects your money. And I really couldn't find anything. There was very little on that. So I wanted to kind of dig into that a little bit, which is why I volunteered to be on Megan's show.
Yeah, and thank you so much for being willing to talk about such a difficult topic. It's like you said, something that I don't think I've heard much as well. I think you hear a lot about like prenuptial agreements and what happens if a spouse dies, but you don't really hear much about divorce because it's such a hard topic to talk about because there's legalities around it. There's certain things you can't talk about probably because of legal proceedings, and it's probably just a really tough topic to talk about. I am grateful that you are on here to share your experience. So I thank you very much. But before we do that, I still want to talk about your money story because I want to get a little bit about how the philosophies of your childhood kind of shaped how you feel about money today, and then your path to financial independence and how that potentially led to the separation. So let's talk about one of your earliest money memories.
So my earliest money memory that I can remember was my first job. And you might be thinking, oh, well, what was it, a movie theater or something like that? No, there was a nursery that was down the street from our house, maybe like half a mile. I could ride my bike there. And by nursery, I mean like plants. They grew stuff, right? I don't know how we got this job. I think one of my friends knew somebody there and they got a job. Now I was in like third or fourth grade. And what we would do is we would ride our bike there, and they put us on a payroll. Like we got a paycheck, and they would pay us, I think, like 25 cents for every plant we could. We had to do these trays where we had to stick our fingers in the dirt and then plant seeds and cover it up. And so for every tray of seedlings that we were able to plant, I think they gave us like 25 cents. And so I got that first check and it was like $10. They didn't take taxes out or anything. They just kind of paid us as independent contractors, I think. And it was just so, it was like, oh, this is so cool. I've got like a check, and I remember going and depositing it. So I was very excited about that. Like that, the idea that I could earn money doing something was pretty cool. And so that's probably one of my earliest memories about money.
That's awesome. That sounds like such a great opportunity, especially given your age. Cause I'm just thinking like, how many places would allow a kid to work for them when it's like, you can't technically hire kids legally speaking, but that's still, it's not like you were getting paid so little and doing something so easy to do, but it's still amazing that it instilled in you that kind of, if I work hard, here's what I earned through that work. Like it's literally demonstrating working hard and earning money at a very young age. I love that versus like your parents giving you money. It's a little different when it's your parents giving you an allowance for like chores or just being a kid and they just give you an allowance. It's different when you go out and you find the opportunity yourself and you make the money. I love that. How do you think that shaped how you feel about money today? Do you think that had any sort of impact on your current philosophies? And I ask this because usually your first money memories, they're not usually the first, technically, right? They're the first you remember and that made an impact. So I'm curious how that resonated through to your adult years.
I mean, I'm not sure it had a huge effect. I'll put it this way. We didn't have a lot of money. And so if I wanted to buy something, if I wanted to do anything, I was very aware because my mom and dad separated when I was 7 years old. And so my dad wasn't around and money was always a struggle. My mom was a school teacher and I've probably made more than her my entire adult life. So it was a struggle. It probably affected me from the standpoint that from a very early age, I became somewhat independent and wanted to make sure that I'd have a job or a way to earn an income so that I could support myself, so that I could take care of myself. And I didn't have to rely on asking my mom to pay for something that I knew she couldn't afford. So from that standpoint, I would say it had an effect. I don't know if it had any effect on the fact that I owned my own business for 20 years or not, but
I don't know, because you said that because you guys didn't have a lot, you felt the need at a very young age to be independent and earn your own money. And by having an independent business, you are never beholden to anybody but yourself and your clients, right? And you are your own boss. So I don't know. I see some parallels there. I'm not a therapist, but I see some parallels. So I'm curious about how your parents talked about money with each other. It's interesting to me that you said they separated when you were 7 years old. And so I'm wondering if any money topics had anything to do with that.
well, I've listened to podcasts where people talk about that and they talk about the fact that money was a struggle for their parents and they remember specifically their parents separated because of money. I don't believe my parents separated because of that. I think they separated for other reasons, which we don't really need to get into. But if they separated because of money, I was not aware of it. I'll just leave it at that. I think they separated for other reasons. The money issues, and also I was so young. I mean, think about it, 7 years old. I don't remember a whole lot before that. I've got some memories here and there, but your memories don't really start to form until you're a little bit older than that. And so I don't remember my parents ever fighting about money. Now, after they separated, I remember them fighting about money from the standpoint that my dad was always behind on child support. I remember that. And that wasn't necessarily my mom fighting with my dad, but my mom telling us, I didn't get child support this week, or I haven't gotten child support for a month, or whatever. So I do remember that being a struggle. And I do remember those issues. And so that probably did shape something. And again, maybe that shaped the whole thing. Well, I am not going to be beholden to anybody. I am going to earn my own money and I'm not going to have to rely on somebody else giving it to me. So again, maybe there's something there. I'm learning stuff about myself I didn't even know.
Yeah, it's interesting how that goes when you get really deep into some of these conversations and when you really start thinking back to your money philosophies that developed as a child, because we don't really think about that every day. We think about money as an adult, which is very different than as a child. And we don't sit there and think about connections like that. But as Ramit Sethi on his podcast, because I mentioned his podcast, I think every single freaking episode, because I love him. Anyway, he has often talked about people's money habits and their parents' money habits and how they correlate almost directly. And I mean, it makes sense. That's psychology for you. And it's just really interesting. And I'm glad that you're learning things about yourself, hopefully good things. I'm sorry that you went through that when you were 7. I completely understand. I am a child of divorce. My parents got divorced when I was 3, and my brother was 6 months old. They really could not make it work. They also did not get divorced primarily because of money. It's one of those things where, because my mom, when I was growing up, she raised us basically alone. My dad didn't have to pay child support. I won't go into the legal aspect of that, but he just didn't have to because of how the divorce went. Even though my mom basically got everything in the divorce, it still wasn't a lot that she got. And so it was still a struggle as a single mom in the 80s and 90s raising 2 kids. And I mean, she's an impressive woman. I mean, she became CFO of Berkshire Hathaway Carolinas and invested in crypto when people didn't know what crypto was, and now is like a crypto queen. So anyway, she's amazing. And so I hope that the fortitude that I have had as an adult, I hope that that is a reflection of what I learned from her as a kid. It's really great to look back at your money story as a kid because I think you can learn a lot about yourself. But I am curious, can you say a little bit more about how your parents talked about money after the divorce besides just this child support? Do you remember any other instances of them either talking or even fighting about money, and maybe how some of that might have shaped your beliefs about money?
No, and honestly, if they did, my mom hid it from us. She did a good job of that, I would say. The arguments with my dad, I would say she did. She did not do a good job shielding us from the fact that we didn't have a lot. And she was very quick to tell us that we didn't have a lot. She was very quick to tell us to blame the fact that we didn't have things on the fact that my dad hadn't paid child support. So I do remember that. And then I would go to my dad's house, and my dad and we don't talk anymore. But I would go to his house, and the story was that, and he was a self-employed medical professional, and he was always complaining that he didn't have money. And part of the reason was because I got to give all my money to my mom. And I know he got in trouble with the IRS at one point, and he had a whole bunch of tax debt that he owed. And my mom, she always had credit card debt. I remember helping her get out of credit card debt I helped her refund. This is when I was an adult. I helped her to refinance her mortgage and get out of credit card debt. And then she just racked up her credit card debt again, which is like one of the biggest fears that people have. And so I see a lot of parallels between my relationship with my mother, who is no longer with us. So I probably wouldn't say as much if she was still alive, but she's not. But I see a lot of parallels between my relationship with her and how I took care of her, even though she got herself into financial trouble, and with my wife, who also would get into financial trouble, and then I would help dig us out, and then we'd get into it again, and then I'd help dig us out. And I got sick of doing that, which is one of the main reasons why we are now separated. So I don't know if that answers your question, but hopefully it does. These type of things have definitely shaped me as an adult, because I can never, until about 3 weeks ago when I separated from my wife, and I still don't think I'm quite there yet, because I've got some things I still need to go through, but I don't know that I've ever felt financially secure. And I have a relatively high net worth. So, but I still don't know that I feel financially secure, because for a variety of reasons. But when I was younger, when I was a kid, there's people out there that I know, they felt financial secure their entire life. They never have to worry about money because their parents have taken care of them, because their parents paid for their school, because they got a wonderful job once they graduated, and they've always had an amazing salary. So, and maybe these are money stories I'm telling myself. I don't know, but I don't feel like I ever have been in that situation. I feel like there's always been this underlying struggle that has gnawed at me for as long as I can remember. My entire life, really.
And that's why I like to talk about money stories. The fact that you grew up basically with two parents that had scarcity mindsets, despite how much money they made. Do you think you adopted that same mindset?
I don't think I have a scarcity mindset. I think that what has happened, and I've run, so if you're familiar with Ramit, you mentioned you're familiar with Ramit, then you probably know he's got this like worksheet that he does. He calls it the conscious spending plan, where you basically calculate your monthly income and then you calculate your fixed cost. I didn't run the numbers when I was still with my wife, but I suspect that when I was living with my wife, our fixed costs were probably close to 100% of our income, if not more than 100% of our income. And I think that led to a lot of the fear, the nervousness, the anxiety that I had about money. I think I'm a pretty growth minded person, to be honest. But when you are living in a way where your fixed costs are such a high proportion of your monthly income, I mean, anyone's going to struggle with that. You could be making $1 million a year. And if you have to pay out $1 million a year in fixed costs and you're not saving anything or even going into debt as a result, you're going to be stressed too. And so I think that is what led to a lot of our issues. And that's probably been true for as long as I can remember. I mean, there was probably a time between when I graduated from high school and when I met my wife and we moved in together that I was probably okay with money. Like things were probably okay. I wasn't worried about it because I was doing it all on my own. But then once I met my wife and once we started to integrate our finances, that's when things started to. And I should have seen the writing on the wall, but I didn't. So,
yeah, thank you so much for that clarification. It's good that you recognize in yourself that it's not a scarcity mindset. It's that there was a deep-seated issue with spending that originated from somebody who wasn't you, and therefore it felt like it was out of your control and so made you anxious. Would you say that that's more in line with how you were feeling?
yes, probably. And I'm not going to go so far as to say it was all her fault. I mean, sure, some of it was my fault, but I'm a naturally frugal person, but I'm also a giver. I'm also like a people pleaser. And so if my wife wanted something, even though I knew it was probably the wrong thing, 9 times out of 10, I would give in. And God help us if it was one of the kids that needed something. It was funny, not to talk about Ramit again, but I was listening to one of his podcasts today. And he made this really profound statement, I thought. I actually replayed it for my kids in the car when we were driving. And he said, if you can't say no to yourself, you will never be able to say no to your kids. And so I think that was a big problem because then once we had kids, a lot of this stuff just compounded. The issues that we had before became so much more pronounced because now the spending becomes so much bigger. And so it didn't matter that I was making more money because we were spending a higher proportion of our money anyway.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So let's dig in a little bit more. First, I want to know, like, what drew you to the financial independence movement? And did you find that prior to meeting and marrying your wife, or was this post marriage or meeting her?
No, this was post meeting her and marrying her. I mean, it probably was. So I tracked our net worth here and there, but it was so depressing early on because our student loans were so high. She also went to graduate school. And so we had, between the two of us, probably over $200,000 in student loans. And so that was just depressing because it didn't matter that I might have had like $10,000 or $20,000 in an IRA. I mean, my net worth was still negative 180,000. And so there came a point where we hit the break even point. And I think then I started tracking a little bit more sporadically, but I didn't start tracking consistently until 2019. And by then we had a net worth of around 250,000, I think. And it's since climbed And as you mentioned earlier, when we were doing the pre-interview, it got up to over $1 million as recently as May or March or April, something like that. I guess it was May. And then we promptly split everything. So now I'm back down. But yeah, I think I found the financial independence movement probably somewhere in the mid-teens, 2015, 2016. I started to notice that I was thinking, well, this is something I really want. This is something we could do. We just need to buckle down and not spend so much money and save a lot. But I don't think it really became a thing for me until I started tracking my net worth. And then it really became a thing for me once our net worth started to grow. And I realized, oh, there could be a light at the end of this tunnel. Like, we're not that far. All the bad decisions we've made over the years, irregardless of all those bad decisions, we are still at a place financially where if we really wanted to, we could retire in 2-3 years. I think we were pretty close. But honestly, it just wasn't going to ever happen with my wife. In terms of when I made that realization, the ultimate realization was probably about a year ago. And that's where I really started digging into the financial independence stuff, like really hardcore. And then that's ultimately, I think, one of the things. There were many things that led to our separation, but that was definitely something that contributed.
Thanks for sharing that. Did you and your wife talk about money on a regular basis? Did you discuss your debt pay down progress? Did you bring her into tracking the net worth, anything like that?
Yeah, I tried. She was very much an abdicator. There's no way she could be clueless, because every time I would sit down and do the bills every month, I would tell her, we've got a problem. You need to cut back on groceries this month. You need to cut back on this. And she's like, how am I supposed to do that? I'm like, I don't know. A normal family doesn't need to spend $2,500 a month on groceries. We could start there. Right. And she just would do it. And not, again, I don't want to get into a bashing my wife thing, but I think she was very much like I was an enabler, because I would give her the money and then she would spend it. And then what started happening recently, which I was unaware of, is I had a couple bad months with the business. And so I'd say, well, I can't give you as much money this week for groceries. And I say groceries, but groceries really means like grocery household goods that she might need, and anything that you would just need to buy on a weekly basis. She just started charging it to her own credit card. And I was like, wait a minute, hold on, time out. I'm trying to dig us out of all this stuff, and I'm telling you that we can't. And now if I don't give you enough, you're just putting it on your own credit card? Like, how is that working? So yeah, we had conversations, and we even at one point said we would meet once a week and talk things over. And that lasted for like a week. She just really had very, very little interest in figuring it out, and just felt like, oh, things will be fine at some point. And I wanted a partner who was much more engaged with the process and knew where we were going. It's hard to climb up a really tall mountain if you've got a bag of bricks on your back that are pulling you down. Every time you make it up 5 feet, then you get pulled back 3 feet. And that's how I felt our financial life was. It's like I would make some contribution, I would do something, I'd contribute to our SEP IRA, I'd do whatever, and then she would make a financial decision that would just pull us back down. She just didn't really want to take ownership of it. And I was like, you know what? I'm done with that. There were other issues too. I'm not going to say it was only financial. There were other issues for sure, but that was a big contributing factor.
Yeah. And thanks for sharing that. And yeah, to the audience, like, we are not wife bashing here. I think what we're pointing out is that there's a difference in philosophies around money and how much volatility that can create in a relationship. Because especially if you're not able to get on some sort of same page, because there are tons of people who are in relationships who have different spending and saving habits, right? But if you have the same vision for your life, then you can usually work together. And it sounds like you guys had very different visions for your life. And it makes me wonder, did you ever consider bringing in a third party, either like a financial advisor or I think they have financial therapists out there, or anybody like that?
Oh, we did. We went to, and I know the FI community is going to be like, oh my God, no, no, no. But I actually took her to an investment advisor And we met with him. He looked at our accounts and he saw where we were at. And I told him where I wanted to be. And he thought I was crazy. But I think he was also going off the traditional, like, oh, you contribute 10% of your paycheck a year and blah, blah, blah. And then after growth in 50 years, you're at, where you want to be. And so I talked to him, and honestly, I brought him in because I wanted him to tell my wife where our shortfalls were. Like, and she just was like, I don't know, why are we going to pay this money to him? He's not going to do anything for us, which she was honestly true. And I didn't really want to hire him anyway. I mean, he was a very nice guy, but I didn't want to. We don't need it. You need to put your money into an index fund and just sock away as much as you can and grow from there. You don't need somebody to manage your money and pick stocks and things like that, which is what he wanted to do. He had like a portfolio that he was going to use and charge us who knows how much for. So we did try that. We went to marriage counseling. I mean, we did everything we could for the sake of the kids. We wanted to try, and it just nothing. It wasn't going to work. And so I think we're in a better situation now. It's very amicable. Yeah, we tried.
Yeah, no, that's great to know. And it's one of those things that, in my mind, I feel like divorce is the last resort. And if you've done marriage counseling, if you tried to bring in a third party person to talk about your finances and it still wasn't happening, it's like that's when you have to really consider that. And I get it. And I do want to stress to the audience that there are other choices out there besides just a financial advisor. And Jay, I'm not like calling you out for not doing this, but money coaches are really helpful here because they're not trying to manage your money. They're trying to like help you get your mind around your money. And then there's also, I don't know how many of them there are out there, but there are actual financial therapists, which I feel like is very similar probably to what Ramit does, except he's not a therapist, but they specifically target like financial traumas, and they work a lot with couples. And like I said, it's a very small field. So having access to one of those people in your area might be difficult. But I guess what I'm saying to the audience is like, if you're going through something like this, there are so many options out there for you that could potentially help you get on the same page with your partner. As we talked about with like the childhood money story, there are some deep rooted traumas in all of us around finances. There are very few people who had perfectly beautiful financially and otherwise childhoods. It's just very rare. And that money trauma is coming into every relationship you have. And if you haven't dealt with that trauma in any way, then it's going to make things harder on the relationship. And it sounds like Jay, your wife, maybe had some of that she needed to deal with and just wasn't willing, like you said, to own dealing with that. And it's so sad. And I'm sorry that you had to go through that.
You have to appreciate also, and I agree with everything you just said, but you have to appreciate also that when you have, and I'm not, it's sort of similar to an addiction in a way. And if you have an addict, whether it's drugs or gambling or sex or whatever, alcohol, the first step to getting better is to admit you have a problem and being willing to ask for help. And I was in a situation with an individual who I've been trying. I remember one of our very, 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 very first dates from before we were married. And we went to a museum and she wanted to buy a painting at the museum. And she couldn't buy the painting because her credit card was maxed out. And I remember we're getting into the car and she was horrified. We hadn't known each other that long at that point, and she just broke down crying. And I was like, "It's okay. We're going to figure this out. We'll pay it off, blah, blah, blah." And that was 20 years ago. And here we are now in 2024. And it's the same stuff going on. And it was like, at some point you have to recognize, is this person going to change or is this person not going to change? And in this case, I just really didn't feel like there was ever going to be a change. And so for people that are out there and struggling with a spouse like this, you could love your spouse till you're blue in the face, but you have to understand that being a partner with somebody, whether you're married or not, if you are seeking financial independence, if you want the retire early, financial independence, all those things, and you're with someone who is not on the same page as you, then I guess you have two choices. You can either separate your finances and you just manage everything on your own and they can manage their own stuff. I don't think that's a great solution because as a married couple or partnership, you really need to be on the same page. And you can get there a lot faster if you're doing it together, honestly. Or you decide this is not going to work. And unfortunately for me, it took a really long time to come to that solution. I have a lot of pent up, I don't want to say anger, but I do somewhat resent the fact that it took me this long to get to this decision because I wish I'd gotten to it earlier because it could have made all the difference in my life from where I am right now. But yeah, it's one of those things where it's a really tough decision to get out of a marriage like that. But sometimes I want to tell people that it might be the option that you need to do, or maybe not. It just, everyone's going to be different.
Yeah, and it's hard to say it's all better on the other side when you're only 3 weeks on the other side. But I do want to talk about what changes have abruptly happened in your life now that you have been separated. So you mentioned that you had a net worth of 7 figures and it's now split in half,
Mm-hmm.
but you were on one journey before and now you're on another journey. Can you talk about the differences between those two?
Well, the journey I was on before was not really a journey. It was a struggle. It was stressful. Every month was difficult. She got a job, a new job about beginning of the year. And the plan was, even though we knew we were probably going to be separating, we hadn't done anything legally at that point. The plan was, okay, we're going to just basically take her entire salary and put it towards debt and get that debt paid off. And then we'll split everything after the debt's paid off and we'll both be able to proceed on a clean slate. And we thought that might take 4 or 5 months, which honestly, I think with her salary, that's probably what it would have taken. I mean, it was very evident to me from the very beginning that that wasn't going to happen. I mean, she got this paycheck. And as soon as she gets this paycheck, she's like, oh, I've got money now. So I can spend it. And so it didn't even last like a month. And she was just back to buying all sorts of things because now that she's got the paycheck, now she can go and buy these things that she's been waiting to buy. Because I wouldn't, I was like, we can't afford them on my salary alone. So that is to say, the path we were on before separation was not really a path. I mean, and here are some examples just so you understand. We had recently moved into a new house, which we're renting a house right now. Our current house is actually rented out to someone else, and we're renting a house. And we're renting this house in a school district where we want our kids to be. The other house was not in the school district where we want our kids to be, but we've got a really low mortgage rate. So we did not want to sell that house. Plus, it's rented out. So it's actually throwing off positive cash flow. As an example, my wife wanted to kick out the tenant and sell the house immediately and pay off all the debt. And I was like, no, I'm not. I mean, no, I'm not going to do that. I could go live in that house maybe. If we're going to separate, maybe I go live in the house. I could find a way to creatively buy you out of it or do something, take out a second mortgage to buy you out, something like that. We could figure something out, but I did not want to do that right now. I thought it was a poor choice because I think, and again, this is an example, like she thinks, okay, we need this money now, call the broker, put the house on the market, let's sell it in the next 2 weeks, first offer we get. Okay, well, does it need work? Does it need this? Does it need that? Or can we even sell it right now? Like, does it make sense to sell it right now? Like, she's just always about, I need this now. So she wanted to buy a new couch for the rental property that we were living in. And so I was like, okay, well, let's go to an estate sale, go to this, go to that. No, she goes to like the cheapest furniture store you can find and takes out a credit card to buy a $2,000 couch. I don't even sit on it. I hate the thing. It's so uncomfortable. And puts $2,000 on a credit card. And then she also bought a kitchen table and chairs with that. Versus me, when I moved into my townhome, I bought for $180 cash off Facebook Marketplace a really nice round kitchen table with 4 chairs, right? Cash. And I found my couch at an estate sale for $100, right? That this old couple had. It's in really good condition. It's really comfortable. So, I mean, it's just a difference of the way for her, every decision is, I need this now. How do I get this now? What's the quickest way to get it? And as you know, from listening to a lot of podcasts, Ramit included, anytime you need something fast that's going to cost you money, it's going to cost you more to get it fast. Like, yes, you can go online and order an amazing couch from Wayfair or Haverty's or any place you want, or go into a showroom and get something, and you're going to pay for that couch. Or you can go online and monitor Facebook Marketplace for 2 or 3 weeks, and eventually something's going to pop up that's going to be in your price range, and you'll get it for 10% of the price, right? You just have to be willing to wait. Well, she was always looking for that quick fix, right? It was like, I need something, I must have it now. So that's just always the way it was. It's funny. As soon as I moved out of the place, now she's got 2 rugs. She's got new furniture in the living room. She's got new furniture in the bedroom. And it's like all these things. I don't know how much they cost. I don't know how she paid for them. I know what her financials are. So, but she probably got them after I left because she knew I would never have allowed that to happen while I was still there, because we couldn't afford it at the time while we were still in debt. So in terms of my financial journey now, so I basically took on all the debt from the marriage that I have to pay off now. And I've paid off about half of it since we separated. And I think where I'm at right now, I'll probably get the rest of it paid off by the end of the year, if not early next year. And so my fixed costs are, if you look at the conscious spending plan we were talking about earlier, are right around, if you take out the debt payments, see, they are 52%, which I think is pretty normal. That's pretty good, which means that as soon as I finish doing that debt payment, that's going to free up basically 50% of my income to start putting into investments and savings. And because I've been able to structure, I could have found a townhome that cost $1,000 more than I'm paying now. I chose to find one that was relatively inexpensive given the market. And it's hard to find I live in a high cost of living area, and it's hard to find a rental for less than $2,000 where I live right now. So the fact that I was able to do that, I think, is great. So all my fixed costs together are right around 50% of my income, and I'm very happy with that. The debt payments is what's dragging me down. There's some fixed debt payments that we're paying, but again, I want to get all that taken care of by the end of the year. And then I'll probably be trying to knock out my car payment. And once my car is gone and my debt is gone, my student loans will be gone. Then it's just, how much can I throw into my investments and savings moving forward? So that's my plan. That's my FI plan. And so my goal is FI in 5 years. So I would say one of your questions you asked is, what path am I targeting? I'm probably already at Coast FI, because based on the investments I already have, I probably in 6 or 7 years, if they double, I'll have enough in the bank to be pretty close to FI. But if I start contributing aggressively to them, I think I'll get there sooner than that. So that's my goal. That's my plan.
Yeah, that sounds like a great plan. And for anybody who this might be their first episode, I'm going to define Coast FI, which basically means that you have enough invested in your retirement or investment accounts that if you stopped investing today, if you stopped contributing and the money grew to your age of 65, you would have enough to carry you through normal retirement. And so the cool thing about Coast FI is that if you have a lifestyle that's relatively affordable, you can take work that's less stressful, you can take work that's part-time, and you can get some of that time back now without having the burden of having to save for your retirement, because your retirement is already set. So that's what Coast FI is, if anybody's wondering. And yeah, that sounds like a great plan, Jay. And it's amazing that you seem to have taken like this very trying experience, but you were like, here is my plan. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. And I'm right there with you, because whenever I go through something really stressful, it eases my entire body and soul to have a plan. And I think we're similar in that way. I think that's probably everybody in the FI movement. So, and yeah, I wish you luck on that. Given this experience that you've had, what would you recommend to people listening right now when they are starting a new relationship, and things that they should potentially ask their new partner, watch for in their new partner, like not just red flags, but also conversations that they maybe want to avoid or do want to have? What are some of your recommendations for the audience there?
Well, I'll tell you my plan. Number one, I don't think that I could get into a relationship with somebody where I'm at right now. And this is not nothing to do with my wife, but right now, where I'm at and wanting to get out of debt. And I mean, we're not talking about a huge amount of debt here, but I don't want to have any debt. And I don't think it would be fair for me to jump into a relationship before I am at a place where I feel pretty comfortable financially. And that doesn't necessarily mean I need to have a year of savings in the bank, but it does mean that I've got my fixed costs under control. I'm putting money away each month automatically into investments, and I feel pretty comfortable with that. And I've got kind of a plan. I'm working the plan, and we're getting things are good. And so as I start to look into maybe potentially getting into another relationship at some point in the future, I think that it would be important for me and for anyone else out there who's thinking about this to have that conversation with your potential partner early. Excuse me. Do you have debt? Why do you have debt? Is it because you've made poor choices? Is it because something else happened? Like, do you have a plan to pay it off? I would want to know once I get to know them. I probably want to know what their net worth is. Do they track their net worth? Do they even know? How much are they putting away into the retirement account each month? Like, are they responsible? Because the last thing I want to do is get into a relationship that's exactly the same as the relationship I'm in right now or was in recently, where I'm dealing with somebody who is a spender. And I think that'll be pretty obvious. So I would say it's important to have that conversation early. Maybe not the first date, but I would say by the second or third date. I mean, this is, I'm at my age, and we won't reveal my age, but at my age, I'm not effing around, right? So and I don't even know if I want to get married again. That's a whole nother conversation. But for people that do, it's a big decision, and you want to make sure you've done it right. I think it's important to go through maybe financial counseling. If you're religious, you can go to the church, and the church will put you through a financial course or whatever you want to do. I was naive. When I first met my wife, we were young. We were both supposed to be professionals of certain types who were going to be making decent salaries. I anticipated she would have a good job. I was going to have a good job, and money was never going to be an issue. That was the way I looked at it. Now I know it doesn't matter how much money you make, whether you're making $50,000 a year or $500,000 a year, you can have problems if you spend more than you make. It doesn't matter how much you make, you're going to run into problems. And so, but again, I think also it's important, and this will be to find somebody who shares your values. And for me, those values are somebody who doesn't need to necessarily go out and spend money to be happy. Someone who can say, you know what, we're going to go to a pickleball court this afternoon and play pickleball for a couple hours. That's free and it's fun, and we can do that, and we don't need to spend a lot of money on that. So there's a lot of ways to live life that are frankly probably more healthy and don't cost as much money. It's like Mr. Money Mustache talks about riding his bike everywhere and just enjoying the outdoors and doing things like that. And if you do that, you're going to be a healthier, happier person. And so I'm just looking for someone who would share something like that. So if you are on the financial independence journey, chances are you are probably also going to be looking for someone like that. And so you need to have those conversations very early on and be very clear about what your values are and what you want, and make sure that this person that you're talking to is not just giving you lip service, is actually living those values. And you'll figure that out as you continue to date them, I guess.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, it's one of those things where it can scare some potential partners away. But that's okay. I might have told this story on a previous episode, but I'm going to tell it again anyway because it's totally relevant. But I was dating somebody, obviously, well before I met my partner, who I've been with for 3.5 years. But I was dating somebody, and I think we had been on, I don't know, several dates. We'd been dating for like a month or two, and we were getting to that point where we were going to settle into like, okay, well, this is going to be a relationship. And I think I brought up God, I don't know how exactly I brought up that I was part of the fire community, but it was something like that I said that my savings, I wanted to get to a savings rate that was 50%. And he was like, whoa, that's really high. And I was like, yeah, because I want to retire early. I'm really into personal finance. And he was like, oh, that's cool. And then I literally never heard from him again. He just like straight up ghosted me. And I just thought that was like, it was hurtful in the moment, but it was also kind of funny because I think I posted about it in one of the Choose Fi Facebook group. I'm not in that group anymore, but when I was, I posted it and somebody said, it's probably not good to tell somebody right away that you're in a cult. Like, okay, but soft cult, soft cult. But I mean, now it's funny. Like I said, it was a little hurtful in the moment because I was like excited about this guy, but it's one of those things where I'm glad that I did it because obviously that would have been something that what became contentious between us because if he was so uncomfortable about money that he couldn't even talk about it at all, like that's big huge red flag. So it's one of those things where you don't have to go on the first date and say, so what's in your savings account? What's your net worth? What's your savings rate? Don't inundate
No,
people that much. But you know,
but your money story questions.
yeah, you can say, yeah, exactly. You could say, what's one of your earliest money memories? How'd your parents talk about money? Like, what are your future goals? Where do you see yourself in like 10 years? Okay, don't ask it like that because that's like an interview question, but something along those lines that's more getting them talking about their vision for their life. And then inevitably, sometimes a lot of the time, especially if they're financially minded, they will bring money into the conversation. And I could not tell you how my partner and I talked about if we talked about money on our first date or not. I don't think so. We talked about childhood trauma on our first date, though. And that's what was great because it was very comfortable to talk to him. And I think I brought up the whole financial independence thing within a couple months because I felt so comfortable with him. And he was like, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. And he had never heard about it before. And now he's like, when are we quitting our jobs?
That's what you
Mhm.
need to have. Yes. And that's the way they should react. Like when I told my wife that this is what I want to do, she's like, yeah, you're nuts. I'm not saving that much. We need money now. We can't do that. And she's right. We couldn't do that. But I wonder what life is going to be like. I'm envisioning my future in like 5 years from now when I decide to retire and do whatever. Like what when the kids go to her and be like, hey, daddy's not working anymore. And she's going to be like, what? And I wonder if she'll be like, I wish I'd, stayed on that train. Anyway, yeah, things will be what they are.
Yeah, I'm actually like when you described her behaviors, I understand the need for convenience and like wanting to pay a little bit more to get things now versus later. And actually, the episode right before this one with Lon, I made the joke that I want to text her whenever I want to buy something so that she can talk me out of it because she's super frugal and good at talking herself out of buying things. I see that, but I would never go so far as to put myself in a financial situation that I couldn't handle because I wanted a couch. I don't want to say that in a disparaging way at all, but it's more that it's like the priorities I have with my money are more things that are like, if I have to go into debt for this, I'm only going to do that if it's urgent and necessary. So, for example, I have to replace the siding and repaint some of the siding on my house. It's going to be $8,000. If I don't do that, it will damage my house to a point where it's going to be even more later. But I don't have the money for that right now because I spent it on other things for this house. This house is draining me. I've talked about this on the show, but like I love my house, but it's like draining every cent from me. But I don't have that in an emergency fund right now. Like I have it in investments, but I'd prefer not to. So what I do, which I don't recommend people doing, but this is what I do, is I take out 0% credit cards and I put it on there and I see that as like a 0% loan. The problem is that's debt. But I would, like I said, I would never do that to buy a couch. I would only do that for something that's like has to be done, like a medical bill or a house thing or something like that.
And the important thing about that is there's a couple things. The first thing is to recognize the decision for what it is, like it's an urgent need, and making sure you have that conversation with your partner about, is this an urgent need or is this something that can wait until next summer? Or is this something, or are we going to get a bonus at work or something going to happen where maybe is there another way to pay for it that doesn't involve taking out debt? So there's different ways to do it. Or maybe the company you decide to hire, they have 0% financing if you pay them. I think it's more about the decision-making process and not just saying, okay, this is the first option. It's the most convenient, might be the most expensive, but we just need to do it, and just doing it. Because that's where I think people get into trouble. And that's where I know we've gotten into trouble. If people make spontaneous impulse financial decisions, especially on things that are multiple thousands of dollars, that's where they end up getting into debt. And they're like, I don't even know how I got into $50,000 in credit card debt. Like, I don't know how that happened. So, but that's how it happens.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, because if the motivation behind the debt is because you're trying to keep up with the Joneses, like buying that couch or buying the stuff, then it's really not an intelligent financial decision. I'm kind of trying to make myself feel better about the whole 0% credit card, because I'm sure people on the podcast who are listening right now are probably like, whoa. But it's one of those things that I thought this through. I was like, what are all the ways that I could pay for this? And what are the ways that I could pay for this that would have the least amount of ramifications for my net worth? Sure, I could pull it out of my investment accounts, but today is August 7th. Monday and Tuesday, the market, I don't know how much, but my investments went from 152 to 139. So it's a big crash. And so I had to pay for this, like put the deposit down today. And so if I had cashed out an investment to pay for this, I would have lost a ton of money on that versus just opening the credit card. And I know I always pay these off. I have never, ever not paid a 0% credit card off when I've done this before. And I've done this repeatedly. Again, I would not recommend this. I thought this through. I didn't just knee-jerk reaction, wanted a thing, and towards your wife. What I want to say is that I feel bad for her apparent need to keep up with the Joneses. When you have those urgent needs and you're like, I need this now, I want this now, I want the convenience factor, that to me is society telling you that you need these things. And you're seeing it everywhere. If you're on Pinterest or Instagram or wherever, and you see these beautiful homes and you're like, I want exactly that aesthetic. How do I get that aesthetic? It's going to be what makes me happy. And a lot of people fall victim to that because it just eats into that human behavior that a lot of us just don't realize we're on this hamster wheel. And I think in the FI community, we've gotten off of it so we can see from an outside perspective what that looks like. But when you're in it, it's hard to see it. And so I feel like there needs to be a little bit of compassion for people like that rather than like, oh, you're dumb. I think it's better to see them with compassion and almost like, I don't want to say pity, because that's, nobody likes to be pitied, but just, I hope that someday, given the fact that she's no longer with you and is now having to do this on her own, that she is able to pull herself out of that and learn a different way of spending money.
Yeah. Obviously, we don't talk about her finances anymore. I've asked her a couple times, like, what are you doing here? Is this smart? And she's like, that's not your business. Don't ask. And that's fine. That's her right to do that. But what we didn't talk about is her money story. And her money story is very different than mine. But that's her story. And that's not something that I think I could effectively share, even though I probably could tell it. I mean, yeah, I want the best for her. So I don't know what that is going to mean. I don't know if her plan is to find another spouse that's going to take care of her or what's going to happen and just repeat the cycle. And if that happens, great, more power to her. But yeah, those expensive purchases are not what make me happy, right? My vision is at a point when I feel financially secure, I can work on the projects I want to work on and not the other projects. I can work with the clients I want to work with and not the other clients. I can take more time out of my days, weeks to travel. I'd love to travel around the world and do more things outside and just enjoy life and eat good food and just live a rich life. And that's what I want. And ideally, I'll have enough money that will support that when I get to that point. So that's my plan. That's what I want.
Yeah, I love that. It sounds like a beautiful life. And I do hope that you find another partner. And I hope this partner is in the FI community. And I hope you live happily ever after with that person. That's what I'm going to envision for you.
I need to go to some of these conferences and see if other people there. We'll see.
Network. Yeah, exactly. Actually, the conferences are life-changing. Seriously, if you've never been to a campfire, you should totally go. The one near me is really fun, and the one near me is the one that Brad sometimes goes to from Choose FI. He was there this last year
Is
in
that the one
May.
in Florida?
No, that's the Mid-Atlantic one. It's in Virginia.
Oh, there's one in Virginia too? I did not
Yeah,
know that. Okay.
yeah.
Well, that's all Southeast USA.
Exactly. So you could go to either. And so whichever one's closer to you. But the one in the Mid Atlantic is the one that Brad usually goes to. So if you want to like see him, he's a really nice guy. And it's life changing because you finally like, here are my people. It's like a cult gathering in the best way. And I laugh because it's a soft cult. Like we all have very similar philosophies when it comes to money, but it's not like there's no religious aspect to it and there's no conspiracy theory aspect to it, thank goodness. But yeah, it's really fun. Stephen puts on a really great event. There's the economy
Economy.
conference. Yeah. There's also, oh God, there's so many more. And oh, I wish.
You're Mr. Money, the mustachian
Yes.
something. This is
Yeah,
one.
the mustache, I think,
Yeah.
is one.
It's up
And
in like
then
Portland or someplace though.
yeah, and I think it's only in one place instead of all around the country. Like the campfires are all around the
Yeah.
country, so it makes it easier.
Have you been to a lot of these?
So I've been to just the Camp Fives. I haven't been to Economy yet. I want to go next year. I am going to the FinCon conference, but
Oh,
that's not FI. That's like
it's like
all of personal
bloggers.
finance. Yeah. And it is for creators. Yeah. I don't think it's like everyday people go, which is a little different. But I am going to be meeting Bill from Catching Up to FI there. He has like a group that gets together that's like a FI group.
Yeah,
So
he's and he has a partner his on the podcast that he does. Yeah, I've listened to them. Yeah, they do the catching up to FI, and I actually found that one because I feel like that's kind of where I'm at now that I've had to divide my net worth in half. I think we were getting pretty close, but now I'm back to catching up to FI, so I'm kind of on that road.
yeah, that would be a great one to start listening to. And it's Jackie. It's Bill and Jackie. Their show is excellent for anybody who feels like they're behind. And it doesn't have to be people who are like in their 40s or 50s. If you're in your 30s and you still feel like you're behind, even if you're in your 20s and you're like, I want to retire by 35, but I feel behind, it's still a good one to listen to because it has specific strategies about how to accelerate that process. And they talk to a lot of really interesting people who have these mindset set shifts that they had. Yeah, it's a great show. So I'll put the link to their podcast in the show notes, of course. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to meeting them there because I was like, this is going to be a huge conference and I'm going to be there all by myself and going to know anybody. And like, I'm really hoping to meet Paula Pant. She's like one of my heroes. I love her from Afford Anything. I love her show, and I just think she's one of the most intelligent people I've ever heard speak. And I would probably be really intimidated by her because I would be like, every word that's coming out of my mouth sounds like blah, 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 blah. Because her like level of podcasting is like up here. It's funny because I tell my partner that sometimes I compare my podcast and my questions to hers, and he was like, okay, but she's a Columbia trained like financial journalist, Megan. You're not. And I was like, that's true.
No, I did
So,
not know that.
yeah.
That's right. She was a journalist before she started doing her thing.
Yeah, she was. And she wrote about money. And then she trained at Columbia for economic reporting. So she's even more upskilled. So,
Yeah.
whereas I'm just a product manager, different kind of questions. What are your pain points? Anyway, so we're coming towards the end of our time. And I usually ask like struggles and wins, but we've talked a lot about your current struggles. So if you want to talk about your current wins right now, they don't have to be fire related either. You can do any win. Let's end on a high note, maybe.
Well, I mean, I think the current wins I have right now are that I've gone through this conscious spending plan. And right now it does look bad because my number is at 75%, but that also includes my fixed debt expenses. Like, so my wife and I, this is probably the last straw for me, honestly, with our marriage is we took out a loan to pay off all the credit card debt. And when we did that, I said, okay, promise me this is the last time. We're never going to do this again. And then what happened? Well, we know what happened. So I still am paying off that loan, and that's the bulk of our debt payment. And then I have my student loans that only have 5 payments left. I have a couple small little interest-free 12-month loans because I had to buy a mattress I needed a mattress. So I bought a mattress and put it on that through a firm. But I mean, I look at that as interest-free money. Could have paid for it with cash, but it's better to just do it that way. And then my minimum payment for the credit card. So that if you add those in to my fixed cost, it takes it to 75%. But as soon as you take those out, it drops to 50%. And then that whole 50% is going into investments. So I'd say my wins is that I have this plan now where I know what things look like and I know kind of what I can spend on things. And I know that the things are going to be okay. And that right now it seems like a long way away, but I know that by January or February of next year, I should have all our debt wiped out. And that to me is going to be really cool. My struggle, though I didn't mention, is I am self-employed and I have good months and I have bad months. So if I have a bad month, our fixed costs are a much higher percentage. If I have a good month, it's like, wow, I've got all this extra money. So I need to focus on really, now that I have this plan in place, building the business to the point where I have many, many more good months than bad months. And that's something I'm working on right now. Yeah. So wins are, I'm happy. My kids are happy and I'm feeling like I'm in a good place and I'm at peace with my decision to leave the marriage.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And it sounds like it was a mutual decision, right?
Yes, it was mutual. Yeah, my wife described us as a old pair of shoes. We looked shiny and fresh at the very beginning. They were comfortable. They fit well. But over years, they develop some holes. They get kind of ruddy and you don't really want to wear them anymore. They don't quite fit the same. And so you decide to toss them out. I know that sounds a little strange, but that's, I think, basically what our marriage amounted to. But yeah, we did what's called, I can't remember the name of it. It's basically a special kind of divorce counseling where you go and meet with a divorce counselor or a marriage therapist. And the whole goal is after you do 4 sessions, the plan is either A, we're going to stay together and get counseling. B, we're going to separate, or C, things are going to be good and we've made a renewed commitment to the marriage. It took us 1 session and we both said, we're done with the marriage. So it was a very mutual decision. It's been very amicable. Everything's been good. So yeah, I'm happy.
Yeah, that's good. And that's kind of all you can ask for in a situation like this. I've obviously never been through it myself, but I know divorce can be very difficult based on what others have said. So the fact that it's amicable and mutual is great. Well, is there anything else that you would like to talk about before we end it? Is there any topic that we didn't discuss that you really want to leave our audience with?
If you're out there and you're in a relationship and you're struggling because you think maybe your partner or spouse is not on the same page with you in terms of finances, I'm not going to tell anyone life is short, get a divorce, but you go to some counseling, do something, have those difficult conversations. Don't just throw it under the rug and hope it's going to get better at some point. You need to address it. And it was interesting because that was what we did for many, many years. And it wasn't until I finally started having those difficult conversations with my wife and explaining to her that I wasn't going to back down on these things. I threw up the boundaries and said, this is what we need to do to make this work, that the true colors really came out and we realized it wasn't going to work. She was not willing to meet me on those boundaries. And so that became a problem. So you just need to be fair to your spouse in that way. I think that's the best thing you can do. And there's life on the other side if you do choose to go that way.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I like that you said that you want to be fair to your partner by bringing up the hard topics, because you would think that that's like, oh, bringing up the hard topics is the bad thing. But like you said, kicking it under the rug means that you don't give the relationship the chance to actually thrive rather than just survive. And when you have these hard conversations too, you actually develop a much deeper connection with your partner. And it also can demonstrate if your partner's willing to even have conversations like this, because it's not great if they are not willing to do that, because hard conversations are not just
around money. You're going to have hard conversations about all kinds of stuff, about how to raise your kids, about whether or not your mother-in-law should come and live with you, about whether or not you should rent or buy, where you should live. Should somebody move for a job? Should somebody stop working and take care of the kids? Or should you hire a nanny? There are so many hard conversations that if you're not having them at all, then your relationship is just, it's not a real relationship at that point.
Or if you're letting, whether it's you or your partner being the one that just dictates everything that happens without having a say. It's not only being fair to your partner, it's not only being fair to the relationship, it's being fair to you too, because at some point, whether it's 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, you are going to wake up, and by that point, things may be too far gone to save it. So if you really truly care about your relationship and your partner and yourself personally, you need to have those conversations and make sure you're on the same page. And if you're not, then you give each other more time to go find somebody who they can be on the same page with and that you can be on the same page with.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, that's a beautiful ending to a really great episode, tough conversation, but definitely something that I'm glad that we're bringing out into the open and talking about. So, like I said before, I'm really glad, Jay, that you were willing to share all of this and to get vulnerable. And I really think this content is going to help other people who potentially either are in a situation similar or maybe looking for a partner or maybe in a relationship with a partner that it feels like they can't communicate with. So I think it's going to help a lot of people. So Jay, I know you're anonymous on here, but you also mentioned before we hit record that there is a blog that you have. And if people want to reach out to you, it doesn't have a lot of personal information on it. So you are willing to share that. What's your blog called? And can you give us a little snippet of what the content's about?
Yeah. So it's called Dad Chasing FI. And it's basically, I post my monthly net worth numbers. Shout out to Jay Money. Budgets are sexy. I don't think he still runs the blog. I was not trying to mimic his name, by the way, when I came up with that pseudonym. I was not even thinking about him. But anyway, I looked at what he had done and kind of was like, well, that's a good idea. I'm going to do that as well. So I've been posting my monthly net worth updates. It helps keep me accountable. I've been doing that since 2019. I've got all the numbers since 2019, but I've only recently started posting the updates. And then I also just post little things that are going on. So if talking about why I've decided to stop using credit cards completely, at least for the time being, why I've decided information on stocks and bonds that I want my kids to learn about, different things like that, my vision for what I want to do with FI. So that's kind of the type of stuff I post about, and just kind of talking about my journey to reach this. And hopefully once I do reach FI, then I probably will make the blog non-anonymous and I'll reveal who I am, because at that point I won't care because I'll be at FI. So that's the plan.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And yeah, thanks for being here. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
And thank you, Megan. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the EverydayFI podcast. If you're loving the show, here are some things you can do. Number 1, subscribe in your favorite podcast player and share the show with your friends and family. Number 2, please leave a review. I'm always looking for ways to improve the show. Number 3, check out my website, everyday-fi.com, where you can listen to all the episodes and leave comments for myself and the guest. Number 4, if you're interested in sharing your own financial independence story, you can find a submission form at everyday-fi.com/podcast. And finally, number 5, join my Patreon membership for only $5 a month at patreon.com/everydayfi podcast. This is a one-woman show, so every little bit counts. See you next time as we continue to go down the path to financial freedom.